What's up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Danelle Hallan, and I am back for another true crime video. Now, on January 30th, 2022, 29-year-old Alexis Ware went to meet her ex-boyfriend, a man named TJ Patterson, at a 7-Eleven in Anderson, South Carolina. She had both of her young children in the backseat of her car, and she handed them over to TJ. The plan was supposed to be simple enough. This was not anything out of the norm, but what ended up happening next has haunted her loved ones ever since. Alexis is a mother, a daughter, and a young woman that was just chasing her dreams. But from that moment on, her family was left with nothing but questions. So let's go ahead and jump right into the details. Alexis Ware was born on May 30th, 1992, and she grew up in South Carolina, but she built her adult life in the city of Greenville. And at the time of her disappearance, she was 29 years old and a devoted mother to 2 children. She had a 9-year-old daughter from a previous relationship that's really not spoken about much at all, and she also had a 2-year-old son. And Alexis absolutely loved being a mother. Her family said that those children were her entire world. Her mom, Alberta, specifically said, quote, "Everything she did was for them." Now, from my understanding, TJ Patterson, her ex-boyfriend, was the father of the 2-year-old little boy, and just based on what I've kind of gathered in my understanding of things, it seems that he would regularly work with Alexis to co-parent their son. Everyone seemed to get along, and Alexis's entire days were structured around those 2 kids. She was always preparing them for school and celebrating small milestones. She was present for the holidays and everyday routines. She was really close to her family, and she wanted her kids to be as well. And so to fully understand Alexis, you really have to understand that being a mom was at the core of her identity, and that commitment to her children was the foundation for every other thing in her life. Now, beyond her role as a mother, Alexis's personality really always came through clearly. She was described as being the life of the party. She had a really bubbly, outgoing, and cheerful personality, and she was also a huge cheerleader. She was incredibly encouraging to those around her. Her brother spoke about this often, and most of all, she was really compassionate. She was outspoken, and she was a go-getter. Her mom, Alberta, said that if she set her eyes on something, she was going to achieve it, and her entire life is pretty much a big testament to that. Alexis used all of these qualities in her career as a makeup artist and a hairstylist. She had a passion for pretty much all things beauty since she was really little. She loved doing her makeup, loved doing her hair. She loved to put together outfits. And so once she was an adult, she went headfirst into the field. And from everything I can find, she was really successful, and her clients came to her not just to get a beautiful look, which she always delivered without fail, but also for the confidence Alexis helped them feel. Anyone can stand behind a chair and, crank out something nice, but it takes the personality to go along with it to really draw people back time and time again, to have people leave your chair feeling like $1 million and confident in themselves. And that was something that Alexis was really, really good at. And while all of this success was great, Alexis, being Alexis, still had a lot of bigger things that she wanted to achieve. Her drive to succeed went way beyond her chair as a stylist. And just before her disappearance, Alexis was actually starting to act on one of those big dreams. She had just been approved to break her lease at the apartment she was living in with both of her children in Greenville because she wanted to be able to move to Atlanta, Georgia, a pretty big move to a huge city. And it seems like for some time, this was something that she had been really going back and forth on. She always had this big dream of opening her own salon, and she also wanted her own boutique. I mean, she had a list of businesses that she wanted to tackle in life, and Atlanta seemed like a great place to do it. Her brother lived there. It was a huge city, lots of opportunity, and those plans were finally starting to come together for her. Her mom said she already had her business license. She again had just broken her lease. She started gathering boutique items. She was getting merchandise and displays, all of the things that she would need to jump headfirst into all of these dreams. And Alexis was so excited about it. And more than anything, Alexis really saw these plans as a way to build a stronger future for her children. Because again, every single move she made, every risk that she was willing to take was with those 2 kids in mind. And her ambitions weren't just limited to running a salon. She's just one of those people that wants to have her hand in all these different things to see what works best for her, what works best for her family. She was never going to dampen her horizon reasons and what she could possibly go after. And so, alongside these business plans and her current business, Alexis had also built a pretty strong presence on social media. Her Instagram account, at Lex Goddess, had tens of thousands of followers. I think that she had around 30,000 followers at the time that she disappeared. But of course, having social media isn't without its problems. She had started to confide in her family that men were frequently sending her unsolicited and harassing messages. She often just referred to them as creeps. And she was really worried that, modeling or influencer opportunities, photo shoots that she would do, that she would post on her account, that one day it was going to put her in a vulnerable position that she wouldn't be able to control. And obviously, as someone who's been on social media, people are absolutely bananas. I've literally had someone repeatedly send things to my house before, find out where I live. And so I feel like it's really easy to look at this and be like, no one's actually going to jump off the screen and do something crazy. Well, I can tell you from experience, yes, the heck they will, okay? And it left her with this uneasy awareness of the darker side of being online. But it was one of those things that she just kind of took in stride because she felt like social media was necessary to grow. So at this point in her life, Alexis was thriving. She was building momentum. She was determined to create something bigger for her children. And that's why her disappearance felt so devastating. Everything that she was working toward suddenly came crashing down with no warning. And this brings us to the weekend that Alexis Ware vanished. Friday, January 28th, Alexis and her two kids drove from Greenville to her mother Alberta's home in Anderson, that I believe is roughly a 30 to 40-minute drive. And the plan was for them to stay the weekend, visit family, eat good food. Alexis was really close to her mom, Alberta. They spoke to each other several times a day, so it seems like these weekend visits were pretty routine. They were excited to have this time together. Now, according to Alberta, Alexis's mom, she and the children arrived pretty late in the day, so Alberta simply fed everyone dinner, and they all ended the night quietly going to bed because Alexis was exhausted, the kids were tired, Alberta was tired. And at this point, everything seemed to be okay. But by the next morning, Saturday, January 29th, that's really when things started to shift. Out of nowhere, it seems that Alexis started to voice fears to her mom that started to really freak her out. Alexis began admitting to her that she was being followed. She thought that she was being stalked. She believed certain cars were following her, trailing her on the road. She specifically mentioned a black truck. And she seemed really terrified about these things that were happening and told her mom that this had been happening for weeks at this point. So this wasn't even like a new random thing that was going on. She had been dealing with this for quite some time. And obviously, as a mother, it was really alarming for Alberta to hear this information, but she was trying to figure out, why would someone follow her? Maybe this is one of those creeps from Instagram that's found out where she is. And so it's not that far-fetched to think that someone that was following her on social media was following her also in real life. And her mom even got to firsthand experience the exact kind of things that Alexis was talking about. Now, as if it was not freaky enough that Alexis claimed to be being followed and stalked by someone, throughout the day that Saturday, Alexis started to receive phone call after phone call after phone call after phone call. And all of it was from a number that she had blocked. And she kept telling her mom, I have no clue how this person is still reaching out to me because I've already blocked their number. And she showed her mom every single time she got one of these calls. She showed her mom her blocked list that the number was on there, and neither of them could figure out how it was still calling or what this person seemed to want. And when Alberta asked Alexis, who is this person? Is this the person that's stalking you? Like, what's their name? What's going on? Alexis would not get into specifics at all, and maybe that's just because she didn't know who it was. But what she did do was refer to this person as, quote, the devil. Throughout the day, her fear seemed to just continue to escalate. And at one point, Alexis ended up saying something so incredibly ominous. Alexis, out of the blue, told her mom that she didn't think she was going to live to see her 30th birthday, which was 2 months away. Alexis loved her birthday. She loved planning for her birthday in advance. She loved to celebrate herself. It was something really exciting for her. And so to hear her so darkly say that she didn't think she'd make it to her 30th birthday was probably one of the most terrifying things that Alexis could say. And Alberta pressed her about this. She's like, please explain more. I need to know why you feel like that. Like, why would you say something like that? But Alexis would only look at her and say that she just knew. And those words weighed heavily on her family because it was clear whatever was happening, whoever was following her, this harassment was scaring Alexis so much that she feared for her life. Now, it's not incredibly clear if Alexis had spoken to anyone about this before or if it was the very first time she mentioned that someone had been following her. But what her family has stated is that recently she had become really interested in astrology. And so she was really into looking into her zodiac sign. And so she would sometimes call up her family and warn them to watch out while driving or pay attention to certain colors. I mean, all the things that you would typically see when looking into like your daily or weekly or monthly horoscopes. So her loved ones probably weren't always sure if her fears that she had were rooted in intuition, looking into these horoscopes and zodiacs, if they were rooted in anxiety, or if they were something real. But seeing the phone calls that Alexis was getting, hearing the things that she was saying, all of this felt pretty dang real. And not like one of those moments where she's like, this is what I think might happen. So by the following day, Sunday, January 30th, Alexis was still at her mom's house, but she was supposed to go home that day. And Alberta did not want her to go anywhere, understandably. And so she tried to encourage Alexis to stay. She's like, listen, you've told me some pretty alarming things this weekend. I'm worried about your safety. I'm worried about the kids' safety. And at first, Alexis did agree to stay. She didn't really put up much of a fight, but eventually she ended up kind of settling down and was like, you know what? I'm going to head home. I'm completely fine. There's nothing to worry about. It will be okay. And Alberta has actually said, she tricked me into believing that because at that point, Alexis totally shifted her energy and she was doing her hair and she was doing her makeup and she put her lashes on. She got in a nice outfit. She did everything that made it seem to her mom like everything really was okay. Like things were going back to normal, that maybe this fear wasn't as extreme as it seemed at points during that weekend. But despite all of the things that Alexis was doing to make it seem like this fear was not that bad, Alexis was still saying ominous things that really unsettled her mom. And Alexis stated a pretty specific fear. She was scared that with everything going on, something would happen to her while she was driving, and she was horrified that her kids would be in the car for it. And she said that she needed to protect them. And this obviously seemed like a current fear that she was experiencing because she was about to get in the car and make a 40 minute drive home. And so her mom was like, all right, just call me when you get home, which is something Alexis did anyways. But because of what she said, obviously it's 10 times more important to make that call. And so Alexis loaded her stuff up, loaded her 2 children up, and she headed out. Now at around 3 or 3:30 that Sunday afternoon, Alberta had not received a call from Alexis. So out of worry, she went ahead and FaceTimed Alexis to make sure that they made it back okay. And Alexis thankfully answered. And it was obvious because they were on FaceTime. She was in her bed. She was in the safety of her house. And Alexis said she made it home fine. She was just exhausted from the weekend, so she was going to take a nap. And she promised to call her mom once she woke up. Everything, again, seemed okay. But that call from Alexis to her mother after her nap never came in. And this is when things start to get really, really weird. Now, allegedly, at some point after this FaceTime call, I can't say exactly when, how this information came about, but Alexis saw the car that she believed to be following her outside of her apartment, this black truck. And at this point, I guess the fear and anxiety had peaked, so she went ahead and called the police. She reported that she had been being stalked, that there was this car outside lingering in the parking lot. It seems like she was completely done with whatever was happening to her. Now, the issue with this information that I'm telling you guys is that there's been no confirmation at all from police that this actually happened. There's no clear reports of it online. Again, I'm not sure what time this happened, if Alexis directly spoke to police or what exactly happened, but her family has come forward and said that she definitely made a call to police that day to report this black truck. But what has been said is that after this point, Alexis grabbed both of her children, got into her car, and they headed away from her apartment. In my opinion, likely out of fear that this person would maybe come back. Maybe police came and drove through and that's all they did, and so she felt the threat still was there. Things continued to get weirder because hours later, Alberta ended up receiving a phone call from Alexis's ex, TJ. Now, he asked her if she had seen or heard from Alexis, and Alberta was really confused and said, no, I was expecting a call from her, but it never came in. And that's when TJ explained the bizarre events that had just occurred. TJ ended up telling Alberta that at some point that afternoon, again, presumably after she got home from Alberta's house, Alexis reached out to him about taking the kids for the night, which apparently was, again, something that would regularly happen. So this request initially didn't seem strange at all to him. However, none of this had been planned. Like, it was all very last minute, and she was supposed to bring both the kids to TJ's mom's house in Anderson. So the same town she had just been in that morning, the same town that her mom, Alberta, lived in. But apparently, as Alexis was on the way to TJ's mom's house, she called him telling him that she was running out of gas and she didn't have enough gas money to finish the trip. So they figured out where she was, where she could make it to with the amount of gas she had, and they agreed that she would go to the 7-Eleven on Highway 29 North in Anderson, and he would meet her there to help. Around 7:30 p.m., Alexis pulled into the gas station with both of the kids, and TJ met her there. And she handed both kids over to TJ. It seems they both got into the back of his car. Presumably, she got gas. And TJ said that the plan was for her to now follow him to his mother's house where the children would stay the night. And then he said that she claimed that she was going to head over to her own mom's house since she also lived in Anderson. Now, this alone struck Alberta as odd because Alexis had just left Anderson that morning. So if she had intentions of dropping the kids off with TJ, why didn't she just do it then when she was already there, especially knowing she might not have the gas money to get back? She'd also never mentioned that it was part of her plan to her mom. Like, it seemed like she planned to go home, have a great night, everything was going to be fine. She actually seemed pretty adamant to go home. She never said she was going to come back over to her mom's house that night. She had failed to call her mom back, and if she last minute decided that was the plan, she would have called her. So all of this seemed to indicate that in the hours after Alexis got home, clearly something went wrong. TJ said that after they got gas, after the kids were swapped to his car, they both got into their own cars and both pulled out of the gas station to go the same direction. And Alexis was following behind TJ. But all of a sudden, at a red light just beyond the gas station, Alexis went around TJ and just booked it off in an opposite direction. And TJ said that he was stunned. He thought she might turn around, follow him again, but she never did. And so he tried calling her cell phone several times and she never answered. So he went on to his mother's house, like the plan was, with both of the kids and waited, thinking, maybe she just had to run somewhere real quick and would show up there. But Alexis never arrived. So at this point, he was worried and I guess wanted to call Alberta, who was supposed to be Alexis's next stop after him. Now, I know that I personally questioned when hearing this story why the kids went into TJ's car and why Alexis would need to follow them at that point, because if she was trying to hand the kids over and go do something or whatever, why was she following him? But maybe this stemmed from her fear she expressed to her mom earlier, that something would happen to her while her kids were in the car, so she encouraged him to take them, and once they were safe, she decided to immediately put distance between them, which again kind of makes you wonder, was she being followed again? Was that black truck really in that parking lot? Did police actually do anything? And did this person or people continue to follow her? And so upon hearing this information, paired with all of the horrifying things Alexis said that weekend, Alberta tried to call her daughter several times after getting off the phone with TJ, and he seemed to indicate that all the times he called her, it would just go straight to voicemail. She just simply wasn't answering. But at this point, hours later, now that Alberta is calling, every single call went to voicemail. So either Alexis's phone had died or it had been turned off for whatever reason. And from this point on, no one ever saw or heard from Alexis again. Now, by the following Monday, January 31st, Alexis's family still couldn't reach her. Calls continued to go straight to voicemail. She also ended up missing an appointment that she told her mother about that weekend. She had scheduled an appointment with the Georgia Lottery office in Augusta. She claimed that she had several winning tickets, and so she'd have to go there to collect the money. And that raised even more alarm because she was trying to gather as much as she could to have a successful move to Georgia and open up these different businesses. She also at this point hadn't reached out to TJ about the kids to check in, to ask, hey, can you keep them another night? There was absolute silence from her, which was entirely out of character. So on Tuesday, February 1st, Alexis' family filed a missing persons report with the Anderson County Sheriff's Office. Alberta told reporters, quote, "This is not Alexis. She would never leave her kids." Friends and relatives spread her photo widely online, and they also started going door to door with flyers. Everyone agreed, everyone that knew her at least, that something was so terribly wrong, especially given the things that she had just said that weekend before disappearing. Meanwhile, investigators tried to piece together her last known movements to figure out where she would have gone, what may have happened, and her family told them about what TJ said about this meeting that Alexis had with him. And so technically, TJ was the last person known to have seen Alexis. So detectives met with him directly. And TJ ended up repeating the exact same story that he had given Alberta, that Alexis handed over the kids, was supposed to follow him to his mom's house, but sped past and disappeared. Authorities decided to pull surveillance from the gas station. They just wanted to corroborate the things that TJ was saying, and it did end up giving them a clear look at Alexis's car. They were able to see her get out to confirm what she was wearing that night. It was her driving the car at that time, and she was wearing a black jacket and gray joggers, a black hair bonnet, and I think she was also wearing black Crocs. But they weren't able to confirm much past that because a tractor trailer pulled right in front of them, which ended up blocking the view for the rest of the time that Alexis and TJ and the kids were there. And so they weren't able to confirm the kids were, put over into the car, all of those little things. Obviously, TJ ended up with them, but the details from that point, they just had to trust what TJ was saying. They also went on to confirm that after this exchange, TJ did show up at his mom's house with both the children. They confirmed he showed up to work the next morning. So it seems like TJ really led them to a dead end, and they couldn't find anything at all suggesting that he was involved. Now, it seems that the online belief is very, very different, but I do want to say that Alexis' own family has said that they believe he might know more than he's telling, but they don't think he has anything directly to do with her disappearance. And so from that point that Alexis allegedly sped away from him on is what they really needed to focus their efforts on. Where did Alexis go after she sped off? And thankfully, there were just enough breadcrumbs to kind of give them a little bit of a better idea of what happened after she left the gas station. Now, investigators managed to track Alexis's red Honda through several sightings. Phone records ended up showing that immediately after leaving the gas station, her phone ended up pinging for what I believe was the last time in Abbeville County around 8:15 p.m. So the timing is pretty consistent with her leaving the gas station and traveling immediately south toward Abbeville. But Abbeville is like a teeny, tiny town. There's not much to it at all. I don't think there was any specific reason anyone knew that Alexis would go to Abbeville. And I really hope I'm even pronouncing that right. So this seems like it probably was more of like a pass-through. And so authorities continue to follow this route south and looked through traffic cameras and ended up finding even more evidence that she continued, or at least her car continued, this direction. Several traffic cameras captured her red Honda heading down south towards Augusta, Georgia. And if you remember, this is the same place that she planned to go. She had an appointment with the following day, Monday, at the lottery office. But why on earth would she be heading down this way the night before she was even supposed to be there? Now, it is roughly a 2-hour drive to get to Augusta. Maybe she thought she could go down there, get a hotel, stay there, go to the appointment, and then come home. Honestly, there's no telling. It might not have even been her driving, but what happens next, again, just adds another weird twist to the story. After her car is spotted heading towards Augusta, Georgia, it is seen again heading back towards South Carolina. Now, it doesn't say if she's ever seen making it actually into South Carolina, but there is another piece of information that seems to indicate it's possible she did come all the way back to Anderson. But why would she make an almost 2-hour drive away from Anderson and a 2-hour drive back? And if she had no gas and no money for gas, a lot of this just really isn't making any sense. Now, apparently, investigators had managed to track that there were several sightings of Alexis's red Honda in Anderson that night. It was seen multiple times at an apartment complex, and they wouldn't release any details at all about this apartment complex or what happened. They just said her car was seen there several times. Now, her family ended up coming forward and saying that it was actually surveillance footage that captured Alexis's car at this apartment complex, but no one has any idea why she or her car would be there. Her mom didn't recognize the name of the apartment complex. She had never mentioned it before. She never said she had friends that lived there. And we don't even know if she maybe stopped there several times before she headed towards Abbeville, or if this was after she or the car came back. But regardless, there was no reason for her to be in this area. And so Alberta and other family members of Alexis's ended up printing out several flyers and going to this apartment complex themselves to pass them out and ask if anyone recognized Alexis. And not a single person said that they did. All of these little pieces of movement by Alexis, or at least her car, only deepened the mystery. Her trail was so complicated and confusing. Now, as if the waiting and uncertainty wasn't enough, the family also began receiving harassing texts from an anonymous person during this time claiming to have Alexis. And given the fact that she had just been complaining about these creeps online sending her messages and someone stalking her and calling her, this seemed like a very plausible thing. Her family was bombarded with these false claims and misleading tips, and it trickled from there to the police department and people bringing in misleading tips to them. And each one of these claims gave her family a moment of hope, only to crush them again. But as dark as it was and as scary as it was to hear that maybe someone had Alexis, each one of these claims gave them hope that she was okay out there somewhere, and maybe there was just something they had to do to get her back. But unfortunately, that hope would just be immediately crushed when investigators would find that there was no truth behind any of it. It was just some sick weirdo out there trying to hurt her family when they're already in one of the most horrific moments of their lives. This tormented her family, and it pulled attention away from real leads when it came to the investigation. This was a cruel distraction at a time when every single second mattered. But what ended up happening next made everything so much worse. On February 2nd, so literally the day after she was reported missing, but she'd already been technically missing for a few days at this point, a property owner in McCormick County, South Carolina, which is right along the Georgia border, ended up noticing a red car parked along a remote dirt road in a heavily wooded area. And this is about 70 miles south of Anderson. So when this man first saw this red car parked to the side of this dirt road, he assumed that it belonged to a logger or maybe a hunter. The area is heavily wooded. Logging season was underway. Hunting season was underway. But after a couple days with no one returning to the car, it didn't seem like anyone had ever come back to it. He called authorities because he was really worried. And when deputies arrived, they ended up finding that it was Alexis's 2019 red Honda Accord. Now, I don't have a lot of details about where exactly the car was found, but from the way it's described, it was a dirt lane. It was narrow, secluded. There were cut-throughs of logging trails, and it was all surrounded by dense, heavy, huge pines. It's not the kind of place that you just kind of stumble upon. It was really out of the way, and you don't go there unless you know exactly where you're going, like you're hunting in the area or you've worked there before. Basically, it would have been Anderson, then her phone pinged down in Abbeville, and then she would have driven past McCormick to get to Augusta. To me, it seems most logical that maybe she or someone else drove down to Augusta and then on their way back up, pulled off into McCormick, and whatever happened. And maybe that's why they say she was seen heading back into South Carolina, but it's not very specific because this McCormick is immediately after you cross the border of Georgia and South Carolina, and it's a really random place to be. If you look at it on Google Maps, there's like nothing there. It's right beside the Savannah River. It seems to be like a lot of woodland and farmland, and there's like small towns within it. So if you wanted to go somewhere or potentially dump a car somewhere where someone wouldn't likely find it, this seemed like a pretty good place to do it. Now, her Honda was muddy, as if it had been driven through other dirt roads or possibly off the road, but it wasn't hidden. Like, it was just parked to the side and then abandoned. And finding her car in the state was obviously scary in and of itself, but it was what was inside the car that I think really escalated the situation. Inside Alexis's Honda were all of her belongings. Her phone was in there, her purse was in there, her ID, her keys, her makeup, and she even had a bag of clothing in the trunk. Those winning lottery tickets that she just spoke about having a meeting for on Monday, that was down in Augusta, those tickets were also found inside. And on the ground near her car, and again, it's not specific as to where, like how close, what side, was her black hair bonnet that she had been seen wearing on surveillance footage at the 7-Eleven. But there were no signs of a struggle. There was no evidence of a robbery. Nothing had been taken. I don't don't think money from her purse, none of that. And there was nothing at all to indicate that anyone else had been inside of her car. It seemed like the car was parked there and Alexis or someone simply got out and walked away. But again, why? Who would just take off in this remote area on foot? This discovery really didn't bring any answers, just more questions. Why would Alexis abandon her car with everything left behind? Was it even her who left it there? And why McCormick County, of all places? Alexis didn't know anyone there, just like the apartment complex. She hadn't even been there before from what that anyone knew of. And so this seemed like such a random thing. And so in the days that followed, law enforcement launched searches of the area to try to find any sign at all of Alexis. The urgency, as I said at this point, really escalated because it is never a good sign to find a missing person's car abandoned in the middle of nowhere with all of their belongings there. And so law enforcement began focusing all of their resources on McCormick County, treating the wooded area as a potential crime scene, as an area she might have stumbled around in and gotten lost. So they started to comb all of the surrounding land for any sign of Alexis. A large-scale grid search was launched. They searched over 200 acres with the help of, I think it was like at least 10 law enforcement agencies, hundreds of people. They were aided by canine units, ATVs, helicopters scanning from above. There were volunteers from the community that joined in. They were searching fields and creeks and wooded patches alongside deputies. And for her family, those early search days were agonizing. And unfortunately, even processing Alexis's car brought nothing. Forensics teams very specifically were looking for DNA or fingerprints that might indicate that someone else had been driving it, or maybe someone else was in the passenger seat, or maybe there was blood or something, but they never found anything at all to indicate that anyone other than Alexis had been inside the vehicle. Every single phone call made her family's hearts jump, hoping it was news that she had been found safe, but each day just continued to end with no answers. Investigators at this point also seemed to be working to verify Alexis' state of mind. In the days leading up to her disappearance, they were interviewing family and friends and TJ about what they observed. Also, as part of their efforts, they were checking hospitals and TSA flight records, looking for any trace that maybe Alexis had been admitted for care, or maybe she attempted to travel somewhere, but nothing at all turned up. News of Alexis's disappearance began spreading more widely at this point, and it really did take a while for it to catch on, and was largely due to the fact that she had a bunch of amazing people in her life that pushed for people to keep talking about her. Local television stations ran nightly updates. They were sharing her photo and details of the car's discovery. Flyers continued to circulate both on the ground and across social media. Friends of Alexis's also started to repost her pictures, writing messages of hope and putting out pleas for information. Community members that had never even met her volunteered to help search. There were also all these people that followed her on social media and noticed that this once bubbly, outgoing woman who was always present on social media had gone completely quiet. And so they too helped to spread her information as far as they could.
A mother in disbelief.
The very thing that we actually worry about, it actually happened to us.
A family reeling.
We can't sleep. We can't eat. We can't do anything but think about her.
It's been nearly 10 days since Alexis Ware was last seen in Anderson County. Her mother, Alberta Gray, and the family saying they want her home by any means.
I don't know what to do. She means the world to the entire family.
Since the Greenville mother of two was last seen January 30th at this 7-Eleven, a lot has happened. Her car, a red Honda sedan, was found in McCormick County. The family also revealing today that before her car was found, there was a drone search in Lexington County.
When I wake up, that's all that's on my mind. When I lay down, I hate to even go to sleep thinking that I'm sleeping peaceful and she's somewhere out there.
And yet another twist revealed by the family Tuesday. An unknown number has been sending them messages with claims of information on Alexis's whereabouts.
Just started out the blue on Sunday when we were out doing a search.
That information has been turned over to Anderson County deputies, but the family says they can't be sure it's real.
If anybody has her, please just send her home. Send her home. She has a family that loves her dearly, children, and misses her dearly. Her children need her. Her children need her. If y'all know anything, just please let us know.
Investigators say they are still looking over several items that were recovered in Alexis's car, which was towed back to the Anderson County Sheriff's Office. Her cousin, Lisa Gray, with a message directly to Alexis, if she's watching.
It don't matter what it is. It don't matter. Just if you see this and you're okay, just call us and let us know. Just anything, baby. We just want you to come home.
Now, the FBI was eventually brought into the case about 2 months after Alexis disappeared, and it was actually after Alexis's family specifically requested their involvement. Now, Alberta ended up later sharing that she felt like authorities just hadn't been doing enough, or at least they just didn't have the resources that they needed to figure out what happened to Alexis. And so she had personally reached out to SLED and the FBI, the state attorney general's office, trying to get someone to put more eyes on this case, to get more involvement, more searches, more things being done. You know, who was calling her? Who was stalking her? What was going on? What happened when she called police that day? But every single time, Alberta was told none of them could step in unless the local sheriff's department asked. But thankfully, when authorities really couldn't find anything more of Alexis, couldn't figure out what may have happened that night, they did agree to bring in the FBI, and their involvement expanded the resources available. But at this point, crucial time had already passed. And so her family was growing really frustrated. Alberta said that communication with law enforcement was inconsistent, and unfortunately, like too many other families, she often learned about developments not directly from investigators giving her a call out of respect as Alexis's family saying, hey, you know, we found this out. We thought you should know. Nope. Her family instead learned from the news half the time what was going on. And Alexis's brother echoed all of these frustrations, saying that he felt like they had to constantly push to keep Alexis's case a priority. They wanted more updates. They wanted transparency. They wanted more visible action. They wanted to know what the running theory was. What is going on? Like, even just basics her family wanted to know, and it felt like pulling teeth trying to get any of this information.
All want Alexis to come home. And we ain't gonna stop until she come home. One thing I know for sure, she would never leave her children this long. It's been a lot of us crying. There's been a lot of us not eating, not sleeping.
In front of the federal courthouse in downtown Greenville, family, friends, and community activists made their message clear to the FBI.
We're not going to keep begging for them to get involved. Today, we're standing unified, demanding they get involved.
The case is currently being investigated by the Anderson County Sheriff's Office. The family says they met with the Sheriff's Office this week to talk about the resources dedicated to this case. At one point, the family leading searches for Alexis themselves.
And so despite all of their own personal efforts and the FBI's involvement, weeks passed without a major break. Days eventually turned into weeks, and Alexis's case did start to draw attention beyond just her community. Again, because of amazing people like you that repeatedly tag places like Dateline's Missing in America and podcasts. And so thankfully, Dateline's Missing in America did end up picking up Alexis's story, and they shared it nationally. Reporters interviewed Alberta and Alexis's brother, giving them platforms to stress that Alexis would never leave her kids. Alexis was out there somewhere, someone knew something, and they needed to come forward with information. And thankfully, this got the attention of a lot of people. Not only did her case start to spread a lot on social media, even more so than it had before, but activists also started to become involved. They wanted to push her case to receive the same urgency as others. And so a man named Bruce Wilson demanded more federal involvement and really spoke a lot about how cases involving Black women receive less coverage. The South Carolina Black Activist Coalition organized rallies and search parties. They were putting everything they could into keeping Alexis's name visible. Friends and relatives organized vigils, and her family just continued to admit how exhausting it was to grieve while keeping pressure on the investigation. And they couldn't just stop doing either. Like, how are you supposed to choose taking time to grieve for someone that you lost and you don't know where they are? But if they, for a moment, released pressure on keeping Alexis' name out there, it might completely get swept under the rug and never show up again. So the community stepped in again to keep up that support. Local churches were holding prayer services services, neighbors were providing food and supplies. The public tried to make it as clear as they could to Alexis' family that none of them were going to give up. Now, unfortunately, as time continued to pass, there really was no more information on the case. Authorities haven't really even mentioned if they still get tips or if there was even a good flow of tips to begin with. And so no one had any clue at all what happened to Alexis. Naturally, because of that, theories began to circulate, and each one of them raised difficult questions and just added to the pain that Alexis' family was feeling. Law enforcement, relatives, members of the public all kind of offered their different possibilities, but none of them have ever been confirmed. And probably the largest theory of all is that Alexis ended up being the victim of foul play, and her family heavily leaned toward this being the possibility. If you take a look at those days leading up to her disappearance, she was so terrified that someone was following her. She was fearful for her life, for her safety, for her children. She believed she wouldn't even see her 30th birthday. And so when you look at all this information combined with the way that her car was found and how all of her things had been left behind, this theory really does seem possible. And all I can think about is the fact that after she saw that black truck in the apartment complex parking lot, she immediately loaded up her kids and took them to her ex before driving off as fast as she possibly could. And so it makes me wonder, was someone still following her then? And the moment her kids got into safety, she tried to run from them and make the separation between her and her kids. And then it makes me wonder if someone continued to follow her. And I do want to say right off the bat, if you were ever being followed by anyone and you were in a car or what have you, the safest place you can go is to a public space and get someone's attention, like a huge shopping center, somewhere very busy and populated, or a police station would be ideal. It's also possible that she was just acting on fear and trying to get as far away as possible. And maybe that's why she just kept on driving further and further south. And I personally wonder if maybe it got to a point where she's like, I've got to throw this person off my trail. And so she started turning down back roads anywhere she could to try to lose this person. And maybe she ended up in the area where her car was found. And once she realized she's on a dirt road in the middle of nowhere, she had no clue where she was. She got out of her car and took off into the woods. Alberta herself, however, has voiced her belief that she thinks someone may have harmed Alexis and then abandoned her car there themselves as a way to cover up their tracks. And while there hasn't been any forensic sign that anyone else was in her car, there's still gloves. There's still ways that people can get around that. Did they check for footprints around her car? Was it just her footprints? Were there any other odd footprints? Did they see any other tire tracks or signs that she slid to a stop? I mean, she had mud all over her car, which tells me she was randomly whipping down back roads, possibly off the roads, which to me screams she was trying to get away from someone. But unfortunately, that's just one theory under the entire umbrella of what could have happened if foul play was involved. Now, another theory suggests that Alexis may have chosen to leave voluntarily, which I'm going to very quickly talk about because I just don't think this is the largest possibility, and pretty much anyone that's looked into this case doesn't believe this is a possibility. I know that authorities did acknowledge this at first, very early on in the case, but her family very strongly disputed it. Anyone that knew Alexis said that she would never leave her children. Also, where the heck is she going to go without a phone or money or preparation or a car? I mean, you don't plan to leave your life and then leave everything you need to leave your life in the middle of the woods. Some of the most recent statements from the investigating agency have said that they don't think it's likely at this point that she walked away of her own free will. Something clearly happened to Alexis. And that brings us to another theory. And this one I hadn't even really considered. It didn't even cross my mind until I saw it mentioned by community activists in the area. And they raised the concern that maybe Alexis ended up being a victim of human trafficking, pointing to the pattern of a young woman disappearing along the East Coast, the proximity of major highways that run all up and down the East Coast. Her car was seen on said highway. It was found in a county right off said highway. This is definitely something that seems a little bit odd. When you look at traffickers and how they move, they want to be close to these areas. They want to easily jump state lines. They want to jump multiple state lines. And her car was found right across the border from Georgia into South Carolina. And so it just kind of feels like maybe someone dumped her stuff and then continued on south. But so far, there's been no evidence to suggest that trafficking is involved in her case. And I haven't even seen authorities really make a statement on this possibility. And lastly, there are some people that question whether Alexis's mental and emotional state in the days before she disappeared may have played a role in whatever happened to her. Like maybe she was so scared and paranoid and panicked that she ended up in the woods when there was actually no real threat and she got lost. I think the biggest thing that really contributes to this theory is the fact that her family's been very open about the fact that she had recently really been into astrology and looking into her zodiac. Y'all, people hear that and immediately check out. They're like, clearly this person's not mentally stable. Looking into astrology and zodiac and things like that, it's just fun sometimes. Like, it's just interesting to look into. You guys don't even understand the amount of people that have literally told me in my comment section they're unsubscribing from me simply because, like, I'll make a joke about, like, wow, that was a very Leo thing to do, or like something along those lines in my videos. People will immediately lose their minds over it. And so I think a lot of people heard that and they're like, wow, clearly she's not stable in the mind and she's imagining these things. Like she's thinking they're going to happen because they're in her horoscope or whatever. I genuinely think that's really where a lot of this stems from. This bothers me so bad because I feel like it could so easily be proven or disproven if authorities just had a little bit of transparency. Obviously, people can be paranoid about someone following them and there's actually no one there following them. They can fear they're being stalked when there's not actually anyone there stalking them. But when it came to Alexis, her family said this black truck was following her and she called the police about it. So if that did happen, why won't law enforcement just say, yeah, we actually did respond to that call. She did report this, and we did or we didn't see this black truck. We could or could not confirm that this person was following her or that this fear was real. On top of that, her mom saw these blocked phone calls come in. She saw them with her own eyes. She saw this number on the blocked list. And since authorities collected all this data from Alexis's phone, they too should have the information. They should have this blocked number, figure out who the heck was calling her. Don't tell me it's not possible because I know every single one of us has watched Unknown Number this week. And so I feel like this could so easily be figured out. I'm sure they had access to her social media, like all of these different things to see the people, these creeps that were messaging her. Like, did you look into any of this? And I feel like instead of just being very upfront and transparent and honest about it, they're doing like my most hated thing that law enforcement does and allowing the public to run rampant with these like ridiculous theories that end up ultimately dismissing someone's disappearance when they could just very easily say, yeah, there was definitely some creepy people out there. We can't say for a fact if they're following her, but like these weren't imagined things. So here we are, and this theory exists. And unfortunately, this kind of fits into a pattern that I found when I was looking into Alexis's case of other missing persons in the area and other victims of true crime in the area, where families are expressing frustration in their own cases that authorities are sharing so little about the case, which is holding back details that could help bring answers, but also kind of fueling the fire for just wild, speculative, imaginative theories. And more times than not, it ends up in that person just being completely dismissed. Like, even if she was imagining all of this, why would that make it any less important to find her? Why would it make whatever happened to her any less serious or urgent? Like, I will never understand it, but unfortunately, that is just what ends up happening. And so today, Alexis Wear is still missing. There have been no confirmed sightings of her, no arrests, no one single theory that seems to have been confirmed by investigators, not really even one that they're like beelining on and trying to head that direction. There's nothing at all. The Anderson County Sheriff's Office remains the head agency. Her case is open, but it's unresolved. The Anderson County Sheriff has said that they have, quote, exhausted every possible avenue of inquiry. And despite all of those steps, the case still remains without answers. For Alexis's family, time has only made the absence even heavier. Every single birthday, every holiday, and milestone with her children, it all comes and goes without her. On what would have been her 30th birthday, her family gathered for a seafood boil in her honor, a tradition that Alexis loved, and it was heartbreaking because they all had to kind of realize in the midst of it that just days before she vanished, she had predicted this, that she wouldn't be there with them for her 30th birthday. And now here they are celebrating it without her, just like she said. Alberta continues to speak publicly, reminding people that Alexis isn't just a missing person, you guys. She's a daughter. She's a mom of 2 kids that still don't have answers. Those kids woke up that morning with their mom, loving and caring for them, and went to bed that night having no clue what happened to her. And here they are years later with no more answers. Alexis's brother uses social media to keep her story alive, insisting that silence is not acceptable and saying that someone somewhere knows what happened. And again, her family still seems pretty set on the fact that they believe TJ, her ex-boyfriend, maybe knows more. Maybe she mentioned something at the gas station, or maybe he knows something she was involved in. But if that's the truth, he hasn't come forward and said anything more. Now, in early 2025, Alberta and community advocates ended up pushing for the Alexis Wear Missing Persons Act. And essentially, this proposal would allow for families to formally request themselves that people like SLED or South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, like the state entities, step in if a local investigation has gone unresolved for 12 months. There are unfortunately a lot of small agencies and departments out there that just don't have the same resources as these state level agencies and federal level. And sometimes it's those resources that can be the one thing that can solve a case. And I can only imagine as a family how frustrating it is to know that those answers could be at your fingertips. And the investigating agency is the only one that can say they can come in. And she was told no time and time again by these bigger agencies that, hey, we can't get involved unless they bring us in. And I'm so thankful that they did end up bringing in the FBI. But unfortunately, that's not always how this ends up going. And so with the Alexis Wear Missing Persons Act, this kind of gives the family their own power. After 12 months, they can be like, you know what? This needs to be in front of new eyes. We need more resources. We should have a say in the investigation of our loved one. Activist Bruce Wilson said that the system kind of leaves families powerless when cases stall. Like, they have no choice but to sit there and wait and hope that someone else is going to fight for your loved one as hard as you will. And so personally, I'm a huge, huge advocate for this act because these families need to have this kind of power to be like, you know what, enough's enough. We need some more help. Now, as of January 2025, it seems that lawmakers were considering the bill when it first was put forward, but I don't think it ever formally ended up being sponsored. But I'm crossing my fingers that this passes because it is the least that they could do for victims of true crime and their families. None of these families need to feel more helpless than they already do. If you know anything at all about Alexis Ware's disappearance, even the smallest detail, please reach out. I will have all the details down below of where you can get that information into the right hands. Don't forget as well that with Crime Stoppers, your tips can remain anonymous. And there's also a $5,000 reward for information that leads to finding Alexis that is also offered through them. So please help to share Alexis's story. Talk about it with other people, your friends, your family. Talk about it on social media. Suggest her case to other true crime creators and podcasters. Spread her flyer on social media. Keep her name out there because awareness is so powerful. And in cases like this, it can make all the difference between silence and answers. Until the truth is known, her family will continue to fight for her, and so should we. On that note, you guys, I'm going to go ahead and go. I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to listen to Alexis's story and hopefully share her story as far and wide as you can. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit the subscribe button down below to become a part of the Hallan fam so that we can hopefully bring them home together or bring them justice together. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.